Good morning. Good morning, and welcome to this place of comfort and challenge of the familiar and the surprising. I am Susan Morrison Hebble, a member of your worship team, and I will be your worship associate for today. For today's service, we are delighted to welcome back Reverend Karen Madrone. Reverend Karen is an Interim Minister who has served congregations in Utah and Decatur, Illinois. She's currently exploring the intersection of body and spirit through personal trainer classes and the Spiritual Direction and Formation Program at Meadville Lombard Theological Seminary. Reverend Karen lives in the Uptown neighborhood of Chicago with her wife, Michelle, their dog, Letty, and their cornsnake, Don. So welcome. Welcome, Karen. We are grateful to have Jamie Pastman at the piano today, and we offer special thanks to our tech crew, Jean and Alex, our communication team, Nancy and Suzanne, and our hosting crew today led by Tom Brackett, and including Harriet, Chris, Wendy, Karen, Tim, Tony, Sarah, and Lynn. These folks not only make our Sundays happen, but they reflect and deepen the community that is the soul of this church. I'd also like to welcome our visitors. If you haven't done so, after the service, please sign your name at the visitors table in the living room. Looks like Tony's at the table. And you may also sign up to receive our monthly newsletter as well. And we hope you'll join us downstairs for coffee and snacks downstairs in the Alice Warren room, and grab a green mug if you'd like coffee. That way we know you're a visitor, and we'll make sure that we stop by and say hi. So our opening words today are from Sharon Wiley. It is okay to be tired of change. It is okay to be tired of everything different. Okay to feel weary of resilience and wholeness and learning and growth. And okay to yearn simply to rest. It's okay to be grouchy and unsatisfied, and all the ordinary human ways of being that we are. Let this morning be a reminder that you are loved. Let our time together soothe what is restless in you. May you be comforted in knowing that whatever you are feeling today and other days, you are not alone. You are never alone. Come, let us worship together.
And our chalice lighting words are from Rachel Hayes. We light our chalice this morning with our hearts turned to the work of our congregation. We have inherited this institution from many generations of people who believed in the power of human beings to bear love into the world. We carry this tradition for those who find comfort, inspiration, and joy within its real and virtual spaces. We tend the spark of imagination and hope for the world to come.
I'd like to take this time to recognize and celebrate a church member who not only saw that other church members may want to gather together for Thanksgiving, but organized for several years now a wonderful and wonderfully attended Thanksgiving event for interested members. Is Lauren Patelli here? We need to start requiring these people to show up on these days. Lauren also came up with the fun idea of a movie outing and discussion. Last week, I understand a group went to see Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. What's that thing? And tomorrow night, you were invited to attend the Fablemans. A group is going I think it's in Yorktown. And you can check the news and notes for how to contact Lauren if you'd like to join that group. And then they get together and have a conversation about the film afterwards. I'd also like to thank the mystery helper who repaired the broken leg on the sofa in the living room. Isn't it just heartwarming to know that we have members of this community who see a need and just step up and take care of things? And some more on community activities. We have a message from Dave Lloyd about the Green Sanctuary.
Pink, not green. I'm reading from my only source of news, which is the funny papers today. There's a cartoon. Here's a guy. He's putting on his sweatband to stretch the old muscles, and he does some stretching exercises. He says, all right, now I'm ready for some heavy lifting. And his wife says, any mail? He says, another load of Christmas catalogs. You might have heard last week, we are collecting catalogs. Green Sanctuary is, we have a box downstairs with a sign. And the idea is to dramatize the sheer volume of catalogs that show up at this time of year. They'll all be safely and properly recycled, but by the end of next month, we should have a pretty decent stack, and it'll be a good photographic and demonstrative exhibit of just how much paper comes in. And you know that they have to cut down trees to make the paper. They bleach the paper and pollute waters. They print with petroleum-based ink, and the catalogs are shipped across the country in trucks using fuel so that we can flip through idly and set them aside. So our goal is for everybody to bring in all your Christmas catalogs, drop them off downstairs all the rest of the Christmas season, and by the end, I think we'll have a pretty dramatic demonstration of just how much volume a small church like this receives every year. Thanks.
Awesome project. Also, a few other things. On Friday, December 2nd, come to the church around 7 o'clock to help deck the halls, to holidayize the church sanctuary. Snacks will be provided, and there will be singing too, I understand, but you can also feel free to bring snacks or something to contribute. And then also next Sunday after church, the prison ministry team invites you to write holiday cards for people who will be spending the holidays in a prison cell. The team has supplies, but also says they could use stamps, simple holiday cards. They're not allowed to have like glitter on them, and pens, and if you want to bring snacks for that event, that'll be after church next Sunday. And you can check out your news and notes for other events. There's always something happening. There's a Buddhist meditation group. There's the weekly Wise Elders Zoom meeting, which I understand is not limited to people who are wise or elderly. The weekly breakfast group and a nonfiction book club will reconvene in January, from what I understand. So there are loads of ways to get engaged in our church community, and you can find out more information on news and notes or just ask around. We ask you now to rise and embody your spirit and join us in singing our first hymn, For the Beauty of the Earth.
Good morning. Instead of our usual time for all ages with children, I knew that Pam wasn't going to be here, so there might be fewer children here. I'm going to ask all of you to interact. I think they can do that, right? Yes? Okay. So the focus of our service today is about change and how we affect each other. We'll be using the opening words of Octavia Butler's book, The Parable of the Sower, and those are the words I'm going to be framing the sermon around. And so I'm just going to read these to you, and I just want you to take them into your brain. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. So I want you to take a moment to think about a time someone said something to you in passing, most likely a stranger, who said even a small thing that you remember, or gave you a new way of thinking about something. Maybe they helped you reframe something you were stuck with. I bet if you consider it for even just a moment, you will think of someone or an event. And you could be that someone for someone else. You never know. I know it might be hard to think about an interaction, and we're just going to share a couple of those together. So I did a little internet search and just to prompt you, and I found some examples of people traveling and strangers helping each other out. I'm not going to share those now, but maybe that thought of maybe a time when you were in a new to you place, that might help. There are all kinds of stories of folks helping each other out, helping them to direct them to the hotel they were looking for, or that they were lost. Maybe they needed help finding their way on the subway. There are all kinds of ways that we help each other out. So would anybody like to share a moment of a time when somebody helped them, or that maybe even they helped someone else? Maybe you directed, or that there was a moment when an interaction with someone changed your life, even just for that moment. Yes, Dave?
A million years ago, I was in New York with some friends, and we were trying to find our way to this place and looking at a map, and some New Yorker stopped to help us and said, well, we're looking for this church or whatever. He said, oh, go that way, but if you go around through this way, you'll find Trinity Church, and it goes back to the Revolutionary era. Alexander Hamilton is buried there, and there are all these famous people there. We said, thank you so much, and looked at each other. Everything they say about New York is a lie.
I'm Tim, and Karen, my wife, and I were in St. Martin, the island paradise, last January, and we noticed that the Google Maps doesn't work at all down there. And it's a complicated island because it's Dutch on one side and French on the other, and it's divided right down the middle. It's not a big island, but lots of very confusing roads. And the first night we were there, we were pondering this, and a stranger gave us an app. He said, go here, get this app. It'll have all the roads of the island. And for the whole week, we could figure out what the heck we were doing. So it was great.
I'm Karen. When I was in high school, my older sister was a National Merit Scholarship winner and so forth, and I never really thought much about college. And it was my high school advisor who called me in one day, and I thought I was in trouble. And she said, I noticed you haven't signed up to take the ACT. And I thought, well, okay. And she's the one who encouraged me to do it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Look where it led me.
It's a wonderful story.
My name is Darren. When I went to visit my daughter in D.C., Washington, D.C., right after Christmas in 2019, I wasn't feeling well, got off the plane, was at the train station, and trains were all stopped. They were broken down. I was lost. My daughter had said, it's really a pain to get to my house from the train station. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And this very nice Indian gentleman said to me, here, come with me, let's get a cab. So 4 of us got a cab together. And then he went so far as to then get in an Uber with me to go all the way to my daughter's apartment. And I can't find his name and number to thank him, but I tried. He worked for NASA or something like that, or some kind of bio or physicist. But that just was like the best, nicest thing anyone had done for me when I was panicked and not feeling well. And he just guided me all the way to her front door. So thank you. I can't remember his first name now even. I'll look it up for next week.
I'll take one more here.
I'm Charlie, and when I was a freshman, I did 1 year at Eastern Illinois University, and Economics 101 is the largest class I was in. It's like over 100 people. And he said, the one thing to learn from this class is the only thing permanent is change.
This one's a little bit different. It's a very small gesture, but I was about 15 years ago at Barnes Hospital with my father in St. Louis, and he'd had a heart valve replacement, and my mom was sort of beside her, so that was a very trying time, one of many very trying times, and I was, tearful and sad and felt helpless, and I was standing in line to get coffee, and the young woman, she was probably 30, standing in front of me, turned around and looked at me, and she said, "You look like you're having a hard day." And we had the nicest chat, and she bought my coffee. And ever since then, I've learned the value of the small gesture, the smile, the kindness.
Yeah, my name is Joe, and this story relates to something. It wasn't one event. It was a series of events when I went to work in New York City as a chemical engineer. And prior to doing this, my education and my basic personality was such that pi, and we all remember what pi was, it was 3.1416, and there were many other digits that I would use when I did any calculations. After, I don't know how long, with my very dear boss, Warren Fuchs, pi became around 3, okay? And so he set me on my road to becoming a recovering perfectionist. And the change continues.
Thank you all for participating. You never know when one person in a moment will change a story. Let's take a moment for our meditation together. If you would just feel yourself in this physical space, maybe notice the way you're holding yourself, notice the way that maybe you're tightening your shoulders, you're just noticing at this moment, and then move to a more relaxing sitting position that feels comfortable in your body. These are the words from Nancy Reed McKee. Sit and rest for a minute. Take several deep breaths in and out again, calling your attention to this physical space. Bring your attention here. Pay attention to where you are right now. I mean, where you are, and where you are here in this community, in this sanctuary, in this state, in this country, on this beautiful planet, whirling through the tailspin of a galaxy. You are unique. You are made of cells and hormones. You are a mix of thoughts, emotions, values. You are the inheritors of your parents and ancestors' dreaming. You are part of the human inhabitants on this earth. You are. You exist. You are in community here and across time and space with the stories we just told, the memories that just came up. You are connected across the whole world. You are breathing. You are still. You are connected. You are present. You have a spark inside of you. You are here now. You are paying attention. Let's take another breath in and let it out. And one more. Blessed be. And now we will have our candle lighting.
We enter this space bringing with us joys, concerns, challenges, and blessings. If you have something weighing or dancing on your heart this morning, you're invited to come up to light a candle. If you wish, you can say a first name, a word, or a short phrase to share your intention. Remember that we're being viewed on YouTube, so you might want to limit your identifying information.
I lit a candle in celebration. Alex might cut my mic because it's his birthday on Wednesday, and believe it or not, he's turning 18. So yeah, we're gonna have another adult in the house. If anyone knows an apartment, good job, all that kind of stuff, let him know. Just kidding.
My name is Darren, and this is Megan. And we wanted to share with all of you that on October 11th, we got married.
And May 20th, we will have a gathering here, and you will all be invited.
Wow, how do you follow that? That's amazing. I'm Sarah. I just wanted to share with you all that my middle child, Zoe, who's 11, who's been kind of struggling to find her thing in the world, is in Newsies coming up in the next 2 weekends at the Children's Theater of Western Springs. I'm very excited for her. She's thrilled, doing a lot of tumbling in our living room, getting ready for it. And those of you who know the show, it's just such an inspiring show. So I'm really proud of her. Oh, thanks for letting me share.
I am Jean, and I lit a candle in gratitude to Charlie and all the volunteers who did such a wonderful job cleaning up the yard yesterday.
We light these 3 remaining candles for the intentions that rest in the silent sanctuary of our hearts. One for the joys, one for the sorrows, and one that the strength of gathered community can support you and bring you peace. Our reading is by Manish K. Mishra Marzetti. The ground shifts, sometimes slowly, sometimes like an earthquake, reminding us that the solidity we often love and seek is an illusion. The crumbling dust of the desert plains, the moist fertility of farmlands, the eroding coastline of tidal shores, all are changing. Committees dissolved or are created. Leaders retire or step away. Ministers come and go. Constitutions are amended. New experiences lead to new truths, which foster evolution. The natural course of life always pushes us toward greater understandings of what it means to be human. Everything about our existence points toward change, flexibility, and dynamic recreation. And it's hard because change involves loss. Can we hold the losses well while not holding ourselves back? The ground shifts, sometimes slowly, sometimes like an earthquake. Nothing is static.
Thank you, Susan. And Susan has also been really great to work with, and all of you have been very welcoming, so thank you for that. I'd like to begin with, again, the words from Octavia Butler's book, The Parable of the Sower. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. It's a little hard to read at times, but it's very thought-provoking. The beginning words are, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change." And she adds, "God is change." Again, these are the opening words to Octavia Butler's book. They came to me when I began thinking about this sermon, and in particular in the fall, that there's a lot of conversation about change. In my final year of seminary, I had a class where we studied Octavia Butler's book and related it to the world we were living in at the time, which was 2 years into the Trump administration. Looking back on it, I think that my professor was trying to send us a hopeful message, even though the book was rather dystopian and kind of scary. In the parable of the sower, the main character, Lauren, turns away from the religion of her father and creates a new one based on her observations of life as she knew it. She began with writing in her own journal, knowing that one day she would share it with others. And that way, I think that's one of the things that resonated with me about this book, is that our sources also call on us to think of our own experiences, our own life experiences, as a source of truth. The beginning statement kind of reminds me of when I used to read the Oprah magazine a long time ago when it first came out, and I was enamored. And the last article in each issue was called "What I Know for Sure." When I read it many years ago, the thought that always crossed my mind was, what do I really know for sure that I would be willing to put in print? Like, do I really know anything for sure? I never could answer that question, but I believe that Lauren has stated a "what I know for sure" statement pretty succinctly that I actually completely agree with. I kind of feel like, even though that was many years ago, that in many ways I feel like I know less and less for sure, but the one thing I do know is that everything does change. When you play with these words in your mind, turn them over and over again, and you look at them from different angles, you probably recognize their truth too. Everything and everybody you interact with, whether it was somebody in a passing situation or someone who said something that truly changed your life, everything changes. It can be big changes for sure, but most of the time it's something even imperceptible. I think of it like water flowing over rocks. In the moment, you can't see the change. If you're just standing there watching water falling over rocks, you can't actually see it. But over time, months and years, the rock becomes smoother in response to the direction that the water flows over it. I even think of it like in my apartment in Chicago. There's only we have a couple of windows, but only one spot that actually works for plants, and that is my one spot, and I've maximized it. And those plants, because they turn towards the sunlight, and we all know this, that wherever we plant things, that it will turn towards. You can't have a plant that just stays exactly so. It changes in response. Even if an interaction with someone is very short, sometimes that interaction can have a lasting, long-term effect. Her next statement, all that you change changes you, is a little more challenging to conceptualize. It's the same premise, but kind of in reverse. We change others, and in the process, we are changed as well. When I think of that, then I think of when at my home church, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina, for many years I served on the board, and I served in the choir, and I taught RE, and over the course of me being involved, then that began to change me, and I began to find my own voice. We were all interacting on each other. And I think if you can think of some of even the interactions that I've seen in my few visits here, and I love the announcements of thanking people, and because you can see how people make such a difference here. I believe that we all have a hearty agreement to her next statement. The only lasting truth is change. We know this to be true on an intellectual level, but we humans tend not to like this life truth. We say we're okay with it, but on some level, we're kind of tired of it. We are always feeling the strain between staying the same and the change we want in our lives. This stood out to me recently in my anatomy class. This fall, like said in the introduction, that I've been taking classes at Malcolm X College on learning more about the body. For many, many years, most of my adult life, I have kind of had this disconnected relationship with my body. And this fall, and I had this period of time, and I thought, I'm going to take these classes. And it's been very, very challenging, but especially the anatomy class. And one of the things that I have found most fascinating is that I've learned that the muscles on the front of our bodies are collectively referred to as flexors, and the muscles on the back of our bodies are collectively referred to as extensors. We have muscles on the sides of our bodies that are referred to as adductors, or that those are more in the middle, and then we have abductors that move our muscles away. So we have this kind of constant tension within the body itself. And so standing still is actually hard to do because we have our muscles that are always pulling us in different directions. The body does not want to stand still. It's not actually designed to do that. This was very fascinating. I had intuitively known this before on some level. I think most of us do, but I didn't really know why, and now I understand more why about there is now a movement to have more movement for children and acknowledging that people need to move while they're learning. It's one of the reasons why I try to include interaction, regardless if children are in the space or not. People need to move, they need engagement. So why do we expect our personal selves, our organizations to keep from changing? That is, if our bodies themselves are actually designed to continuously be moving, to be trying to move towards away and back towards homeostasis, why do we expect ourselves to stay? At a cellular level, we are designed to move. We should, as a norm, actually expect change. One of the things I love about Unitarian Universalism is that change is actually built into our DNA. From its inception, our faith was built on people and ideas that went separate ways from those who came before them. We are very much the heretics from the people who came before us. Through the many generations of our faith movement, you can see subtle changes and sometimes big changes and rifts between each generation, even right now. Much like each generation of families likes their own style of music, I'm sure some of you can think of that. Maybe if you just had your Thanksgiving dinner, maybe there were some squabbles over things like that. That even within UUism, there are each generation has their own emphasis and liberation focus. It is easy to look back at each decade and shake our heads thinking, gosh, they were just barely understanding how the world works. We might think, for example, why didn't they introduce themselves with their pronouns like we do now? In the moment, it's easy to think we're so much smarter than those who came before us. However, it's important to keep in mind that 10, 20, 30 years from now, people will look back at us and shake their heads at how naive we are. Everything changes. Everyone changes. Both slowly and quickly, we will change. The challenge for us humans is being able to find the joy in the moment, especially if it's a change we didn't plan or ask for ourselves. The biggest change we have all experienced, of course, is the pandemic that's happened and continues to happen. I was actually just getting over COVID myself. It is still out in the world right now. However, the pandemic taught us that so much of our lives could be lived remotely and that connections across time and space were actually more life-saving than the ones in person. We learned that one-on-one could be deadly, so I have heard so many stories of families who actually reconnected through virtual spaces that maybe they didn't even try before, but when that was the only opportunity, all of a sudden they found a way. We've come to an awareness that hybrid work and hybrid worship is here to stay. I even think about the church that I attend now, which is Second Unitarian in Chicago, that they have figured out a way to have three services happening simultaneously, one on Zoom, one in person, one at a retirement home, that they are broadcasting completely so that people in different ways of life are all experiencing the same thing together. I know that the congregation I was serving when the pandemic began, there were members who were unable to attend in-person services because of their disabilities. They could not make it to services and ended up moving to other parts of the state. While folks missed them, and I heard about them through the grapevine when I first started there, no attempt was made to include them in the community. But when we went fully online, I was able to finally meet these members through the wonders of Zoom. And then the congregation could no longer say, but so-and-so can't be included because they can't attend service. Now the doors are open. And I think this aligns nicely with the last statement that God is change. In this book, they are living through tumultuous times. Aren't we always? When people read it, they experience the shock of the extreme circumstances people are living within and think that this fictional setting could never happen. But I think deep down, we know it could. With the overturning of Roe versus Wade and the legislation that is very active against trans people, we know that the fight for liberation of all people is not over. In one analysis of the book by Reyes Tuluka on the website Medium, Tuluka believes that Butler made the God is change statement to bolster the people around her and the community she goes on to build. For many people, if God is your source of comfort, then building in that God's self, is also change. If you believe that God is static and forever unchanging, I theorize that you believe that you too and the world should also not change, and that anything that deviates from the norm is frightening and scary. However, if you can believe in a God or a force bigger than yourself that is change, and if you have trouble grappling your heads around that, this is one of the reasons I love living in the Midwest. You can see the trees changing. Everything changes. That not only changes, but is change itself. then you can have more trust in the reality that you changing, the world changing, is part of the way the world is. Fighting the change is outside of the way that God or a greater force exists in the world. This was a hard thing for me to learn as an adult. I grew up in a very black and white religion. Maybe some of you did too. There was a mantra we had that God is the same now and forevermore. And if you could believe in this absolute God, then that was like the answers for everything. Looking back on it now, I see that that way of thinking kept people stuck, it kept me stuck for many, many years, and it makes people less resilient when the world around them inevitably changes. When one of their children comes out as LGBTQ or something else happens that shifts that way of thinking, all of a sudden it is hard to align that with the truth. If you think that the world is absolutely fixed, then anything that happens outside of that paradigm is earth-shattering. And people begin to take sides. They're like, I'm holding on to this thing, even if it means shutting out family, friends, and relationships. Instead of realizing that it's okay for things to change, they and I still sometimes make the other person or situation wrong. But if you can embrace the idea that change is always happening, and in fact, even your higher power, your relationship with your higher power, whatever that is for you, is always changing, then I believe you have more resiliency skills. Not only that, but you can still find joy in the moment. While writing this sermon, I was thinking about the time, again, right after the 2016 election. Most of us in the UU world were wandering around in a complete state of shock. In response, I started a practice of taking pictures of beauty that was around me as a way of reminding myself and others that, number one, beauty still exists, and two, since the election was in the fall, just like now, and the leaves were changing, that everything in the natural world does continuously change, and we are going to continue to believe in what we know for sure. We were living through a cycle. Having this knowledge doesn't make it a more pleasant experience, didn't make it happier, but for me, it gave me an anchor to hold on to when everything else was adrift. In our UU congregations and in the larger movement, there are many times when our laments about the changes that we can point to. So many people get caught up in thinking they wish we being Unitarian Universalists, were like we were in the 60s, the 70s, or the 80s. They want that time in the UU world to come back. I can't tell you how many times folks have said to me, I wish we were back being like a college lecture class every Sunday. Wasn't that great? Well, that was what people needed then. Now people need something different. Can we accept that? They want that time in the UU world to come back again. I believe that they are stuck in returning to the past, and so they don't see the beauty that is happening in front of them right now. Our ever-expanding understanding of inclusion. The 8th Principle Project, for example, the fully online General Assembly that happened in 2020 as a result of the pandemic. I don't know if you all know, but there were many, many, many years that the larger GA committee talked about could we eventually do something less expensive, less exclusionary. And the pandemic opened those doors. All of a sudden, things that couldn't happen before are now happening. We can point to all of these things and say, look who we are becoming. When people want to go back to the past, I think, no. What we want is more inclusion, always. It's one of the things that drew me to Unitarian Universalism to begin with. One day, I attended a service back again in my home church in North Carolina, and they had a table that had a bunch of previous issues of UU World magazine. And I know that we can look at each other and we kind of laugh at ourselves for being navel gazers and looking at it going, oh, you're just always picking your own selves apart. But what I saw was people and a faith community that was always looking at how can we be more? What more doors can we open? And even within our own selves. When I look at the folks, the campaign many years back called Standing on the Side of Love, and that was a huge, big deal at the time. And then over time, the people who started it began getting the message that this story of standing on the side of love, that was not as inclusive as they believed it to be. And so over time, even they began to change the wording and how they interacted, and they became more aware. We all have ways to move. We all have a ways to grow, but we cannot go back. We are always moving forward. So I always think about, especially because I've had these opportunities to be here with you all this fall, who is the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale becoming this fall, this year? I know you've been going through a lot. Can you find the joy in the change that you are experiencing, whatever that is for you? If not, I encourage you to take a few minutes to slow down. I really appreciate the practice of thanking people for the service, thanking the people who are part of each Sunday's service, that acknowledges we are all in this together. Thank someone for the work they are doing for the community, whether it's seen or unseen. Remind yourself that everything changes, and you can take comfort in this truth. May it be so. Let us go to our closing hymn, which is number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Thank you, Karen, for that beautiful message. This is the time in the service where we invite each of you to share your resources to continue the work of this church. So let's say these offering words together. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with people around us, and with all the world. Our words to extinguish the chalice are on the screen. Please join me. We have basked in the warmth and beauty of this flame and this community. As the chalice flame is extinguished, let us carry its glow within. Let us kindle new sparks within these walls and beyond.
In our benediction from Cynthia Landrum, we leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection. Our concerns, our care for each other, our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be true, be loving.
I'd like to play for you a movie theme. The main character in this movie is almost childlike, and as he moves through life with his childlike enthusiasm, he creates change for others. I hope you recognize it. What was it? Thank you.